Howdy, author Brian S. Pratt here. So I'm going to read chapter 4 of The Unsuspecting Mage, book 1 of the Morcyth Saga. I'm going to read through it. I am going to give commentary as it comes to me. And then, Alright, so chapter 4. As they passed through Trendle's outlying area, the countryside transitioned from forest to tilled lands with crops growing tall in the summer sun. Farmers were hard at work. Some took notice of Saren and hollered a greeting. Most times he only smiled and waved back, though if they were close enough he might offer a few words. "You seem popular." Saren nodded. "I've been warding in these parts for a little over 15 years. I noticed just about everybody within 50 miles. Side note, score 20. So score of whatever is 20. A little girl ran toward them across one of the fields. Seeing her approach, Saren slowed the wagon, brought to a halt, and waited. When she reached them, she says, "My daddy was wondering if you'd be stopping by while you're in town." Dirt streaked her face, but could not hide a smile that would brighten even the darkest day. "Tell your daddy I'll be along after dark. I have business in town to see to first. Also, tell him I will be bringing a friend." She glanced to James and nodded. "Okay, bye." She turned abruptly and raced back across the field where a group of farmers were cutting stalks of grain the old-fashioned way, with scythes. "Why don't they use tractors?" Saren turned a quizzical eye upon him. "What's a tractor?" It's about to reply, he thought back to everything he had experienced and seen the last few days. Horse-drawn wagons, swords, Saren's cabin. Perhaps this world didn't have any such modern conveniences such as tractors, or cars for that matter. Probably still in the midst of the pre-industrial age. Oh, never mind. Saren got the wagon moving by the time she returned to the farmers. One paused to lean down to hear what she said, then waved to Saren. James saw him speak to the girl and watched as she headed off at a run toward a farmhouse in the distance. "That's Elizabeth, the daughter of the family I mentioned earlier. She's going to grow up to break some man's heart someday. Her father's name is Corbin. His family has worked these fields for over 5 generations. Good, solid people they are." Coming to the town proper, James found Trendle not to be a major metropolis. Rather, it was a small farming community with a handful of multi-storied buildings surrounded by smaller ones. As the townsfolk took notice of their approach, many waved a greeting while others came forward to say hello. An aged man hollered from the front of the town's general store, "What brings you into town, Saren?" "Gareth the Snake and his men paid me a visit last night. Thought I'd introduce them to the mayor." The old man eyed the line of riderless horses strung out behind the wagon. "Got them all yourself?" "No." Slapping James on the shoulder, he had James here helped. Grateful for the praise, James still felt slightly uncomfortable by suddenly being the focus of so many people. One man came behind the wagon and lifted the tarp to reveal the bodies beneath. "Looks like he got the whole bunch. What happened?" "Can't talk now. Have to take him to the mayor. I'll be by the Squawking Goose later, and I'll tell the tale then." As they continued on their way, people gathered in groups to share the latest gossip about Saren and Gareth the Snake. James heard his name being mentioned more than once. As they trundled their way through town, James noticed how the townsfolk stared at him. Not in an unfriendly way, more like he was a curiosity. Why are they staring? Saren looked up and took in the way everyone was gawking. Aside from being a stranger, it's probably your odd attire. It's like nothing seen around these parts. He waved at several of the odd-lookers. "Pay them no mind. They're just curious is all. Not much ever changes around here, and new people are always the talk of the town. By tomorrow morning, they'll have several stories circulating about you, none close to matching the truth, I'd imagine." "Great." Seeing the despairing expression on James's face, Saren chuckled. News of their coming must have raced ahead, for a man dressed in attire finer than anything James had yet seen since entering this world stood waiting at the top of the stairs before the largest building in town. Several others, also in attendance near the building, watched as James and Saren approached what the Forest Warden explained was a town hall. "That's the mayor. He's an honest man, but at times can be a bit stubborn and headstrong." As they drew near, the mayor descended the steps. Coming to a stop, Saren waved a greeting. The mayor returned the salutation. "What are you doing in town? Got too lonely out there with just squirrels to keep you company?" Laughing, Saren replied, "No, John. Actually, we have business with you. Hopping from the wagon, he gestured for the mare to come to join him at the rear. Flipping back the blood-stained tarp, he revealed the corpses. He took hold of one arm and turned it to exhibit the snake tattoo. He nodded and cast an approving glance at Saren. So, Garrett the snake is dead? You do it all by yourself? No, with a nod indicating James, who still sat on the wagon, had some help. If he hadn't been there, I'd be dead right now or wishing I was. After giving James a once-over, the mayor said, There's a bounty on their heads. He turns attention to the bodies lying in the wagon. Looks like he got Garrett and 6 of his henchmen. Turning once again to Saren, he gestured to the line of horses tied to the rear of the wagon. Are these their horses? Saren nodded. Yes, they are. I would like you to give the bounty to James. I owe him my life. The horses are the town's according to our agreement, with the exception of one that James will take for his own. The mayor looked up to James and gave him a grin. I guess we can't begrudge one for the man who saved our warden and helped to terminate a long-standing threat to our community. Moving down the line of horses, Saren untied a brown stallion with white patches from the others and led it to a hitching post near the town hall steps. James, this one is yours. Sorry about the yawns, guys, but I do these early in the morning after I wake up. That way, everyone's in the house is quiet, and I don't be disturbed. Because I don't want to be 22 minutes into one of these things and have someone come in here and ruin it all. Using his spear for support, he came down off the wagon and hobbled over to stroke the horse's neck. The horse allowed the touch with a snort and brief shake of its head. James was delighted with the choice that Saren made. The mayor turned and motioned for them to accompany him. Come inside and we'll get this matter settled. Hollering in a very unofficial manner to 2 men standing nearby, the mayor said, Mayor and Josh, take the wagon around back and unload the bodies. Put the horses in the stable. Confident that his orders would be carried out, he led Saren and James up the steps and through the front doors. They crossed a large open room before ascending another flight of steps to the second floor. They entered a hallway that ran the length of the building, ending at a set of double doors. The mayor led them to the double doors, opened them, and then preceded them into the office. The room was officially decorated. The most prominent feature was a large desk with a high-backed chair, both masterfully crafted. 2 smaller chairs sat before the desk. Several shelves contained dozens of large, expensive-looking books. On another wall rested a long shelf bearing expensive-looking knickknacks. Sitting in the big chair behind the desk, the mayor indicated for James and Saren to sit in the 2 before him. He then pulled out a piece of paper, vellum early, and dipped the quill into an inkwell and proceeded to write out a payment voucher that James could take to the local bank to receive the reward. It was for 1,100 gold pieces, just like Saren had thought. Handing the paper to James, he said, Son, you've done this town and this area a service that has needed doing for some time. Take this and our gratitude for a job well done. Coming to his feet, the mayor extended his hand toward James, who quickly shook it before taking the reward voucher. Now, Saren, how long do you plan to be in town? I'm leaving in the morning. First, though, I want to take James to Corbin's and see if he'll let him recuperate there. He needs a place to hold up while his leg heals. The mayor cast a concerned look to James. I do hope it's not too bad. When James shook his head, the mayor's concern turned to cheerful. Good. Coming around the desk, the mayor said to James, Hope you enjoy your stay here. It seems a very nice town, sir, he replied as he worked with the spear to come to his feet. Turning to Saren, the mayor clapped him on the back and walked with him and James to the door. Going to be at the Squawking Goose? After a while, I told Jen that I would be there to tell what happened and squash any wild rumors that are already making the rounds about James. Most likely, laughed the mayor. I'll see you there if I can get away. I hope so, he indicated to James that it was time to leave. Once they left the office, James asked, He doesn't seem too busy. Why wouldn't he be able to get away? Saren chuckled. It's not the town's business that will keep him awake tonight, but his wife. She thinks that because he's the mayor, he shouldn't be mingled with the common people. He has to sneak out just to visit with his old drinking buddies. They found Saren's wagon out front, the bodies of the dead outlaws removed, and most of the bloodstains rinsed out. Saren untied James's horse from the hitching post and secured his tether to the back of the wagon. Meanwhile, James worked his way up onto the wagon and waited for Saren. Saren climbed up to take his seat and grabbed the reins, flicking them to get the horse moving. Turning the wagon back around the way they came, he headed through town on the way to Corbin's farm. The sun was nearing the horizon, and the streets began to empty as everyone had either gone home or was headed there. A few lone people walked the streets, stragglers from the marketplace or shopkeepers on their way home after closing for the day. Silver waved a hello to Saren and called out a greeting. Saren answered back in his usual, cheerful manner. They left the town behind and turned down a somewhat well-maintained dirt road. The sun was just dipping below the horizon when they turned off the road and entered a dirt lane, at the end of which sat a welcome-looking farmhouse. No sooner had they started up the lane when two dogs appeared. Barking with tails a-wagging, they greeted the new arrivals. Shortly after the onset of barking, the front door opened and two little girls emerged, racing down the lane toward them. James recognized one as Elizabeth. The other could only be her sister, a younger version. A shout from the other side of the doorway brought them to a halt. "Saren, Saren," the girls hollered. The two dogs raced in circles around the wagon, barking and jumping. In the doorway stood a man with the look of having been hard at work in the field all day. James figured it to be their father, Corbin. "Good evening, Master Farmer," Saren greeted with a slight nod of his head as he brought the wagon to a stop. "Master Farmer indeed," snorted Corbin, then broke out with a smile. "Saren, it's good to see you again. I heard you riding Gareth the Snake." To the dogs he yelled, "Sign, Tor, quiet." They ceased their barking and confined their actions to racing between the wagon and the house. Climbing from the wagon, Saren replied, "It was Gareth the Snake and his band. They came for me last night, and if it wasn't for the aid of James here, we'd not be having this conversation." Nodding approvingly to James, Corbin said, "Any friend of yours is welcome in my home. Won't you both come in?" James started to get off the wagon when the dogs came and jumped up in friendly greeting. "Down, boys," Corbin yelled. The dogs backed off and gave him room to come off the wagon. Corbin noticed how he used his spear for support in favor of the leg where the wolf had bitten him. "Are you all right, son?" James nodded his head. "Yes, I had a run with a pack of wolves in the forest. If it wasn't for Saren, they would have had me for dinner." Corbin looked over to Seven, who nodded agreement. "There's a story there, or I'm a three-legged dog. But that can wait for later." "Devin," Corbin turned his head and hollered back into the house. A lad of about 14 emerged. "Take Saren's wagon and the horses and see to their care." The lad nodded and took the reins as he led Saren's wagon around back. James found the house to be a homey, well-cared-for country home. A woman was in the kitchen area working on dinner. Corbin entered after James and said, "This is why my wife, Mary. Have a seat at the table. Dinner should be ready." James took a seat, and the girls quickly moved to sit on either side of him. Saren just smiled. "Corbin, I've got a favor to ask you." "What?" the master of the house replied as he took his place at the head of the table. "James is injured and a stranger to these parts. I would consider it a personal favor if he could use your spare room to recuperate for a week or so. His leg is not well enough for traveling." The farmer turned a thoughtful look upon him. "I would help out where I could," James offered. "I would even pay if you like." I'm not one who usually allows strangers to stay in my home, Saren. But you saved my skin on several occasions, so I suppose I can make an exception here." Keeping his attention focused on James, Corbin said, "We're not rich here. You'll get just simple fare. If you wish, you can stay with us. Though should you give us any problems, you'll be out the door and on your way. I'll not have trouble in my house. Do we understand each other?" "Yes, sir, we do." "Fine." Turning toward the kitchen, he hollered, "How much longer till dinner, woman?" "It's coming now," Mary said as she emerged carrying a platter loaded with roasted chicken and vegetables. She set the platter in the center of the table, then turned to Corbin. "If you holler like that at me again, Master Farmer, you can go eat with the hogs for all I care." After fixing him with a stern glare, she returned to the kitchen. In spite of the bickering, James had the feeling that they really cared for each other. About this time, Devin returned. He took his seat at the table opposite James. "Where are you from?" asked Elizabeth's sister. "You sure have funny-looking clothes." "Don't bother the boy, Sienna," the father chided. It's not nice to ask questions like that." "That's okay," James assured him. Turning to Sienna, he said, "I'm from a small town like this one that's far, far away." He gestured to his clothes, "And this is what we wear where I come from." "Do you miss it?" she asked, casting a quick glance at her father, who didn't say anything about her questions. They didn't seem to bother James. "A little. You always miss your home," he replied wistfully. As Mary placed the last of the food on the table, she took her seat and Corbin announced, "Enough questions, let's eat." Baked chicken, some vegetables, and bread, simple as Corbin had said, but very good and filling. While they ate, Corbin had Saren relate the tale of the outlaw attack. In deference to James, he glossed over the parts that magic played. He also toned down the gory details, respecting the sensibility of the girls and Mary. Devin listened intently, asking many questions about the fighting. During the tale, James was startled when his leg was unexpectedly thumped. The dogs had taken their positions beneath the table. James noticed that Corbin and his family tossed bones and other scraps to them. The dogs spent the meal happily and noisily, gnawing away. James even caught Sienna magnanimously sharing a few of her vegetables as well. When dinner concluded, the men retired to the living room for a smoke and a cup of ale. Saren came to James and took his leave. I'm heading down to the Squawking Goose. I promise to tell the story of the bandit attack. You'll be fine here. Corbin's a good man, if a bit grumpy at times. I heard that. Of course you did. I said it for your benefit. Smiling, Corbin continued. If I don't see you when I return afterward, take care. With that, he extended his hand, and James shook it. Goodbye, Saren. Thanks for all you have done for me. I'd say we're even. I saved your life, and now you've saved mine. Saren said goodbye to Corbin and his family. He then headed out the door to the stables, where he readied his horse for the ride into town. Mary and the girls showed James to his room, where he found his backpack and spear already resting in a corner. Devin must have put them there when he took care of the wagon. The room was rather small. James sat on the edge of the bed and found it quite soft and comfortable. The furnishings were sparse, with a bed, nightstand, and a squat three-legged stool. There was also a small chest for clothes positioned at the foot of the bed. James reclined on the bed and relaxed. A window above his head allowed a soft breeze to waft in and soon lulled him to sleep. Long before he had any desire to shed the veil of sleep, an annoying rooster beneath his window began to crow, making a general nuisance of itself. The insistent crowing prevented him from returning to sleep. Every time he was about to fall asleep, the rooster would crow and startle him back to consciousness. Sighing, he realized that further sleep was simply impossible with that racket going on outside. He lay in bed for some time, hoping the rooster would stop, but the annoying bird seemed content to crow all morning long. Exasperated, he finally gave up completely and sat on the edge of the bed. Feeling better for the full night's sleep, but wishing the rooster had picked a spot farther away to greet the morning, he got out of bed and made his way to the window. It was a little rooster. It cocked its head to one side and looked up at James out of one eye as if to say, "Yeah? You want something?" "Shoo!" As if in spite, the rooster crowed one last time before it casually walked away. It looked to be the beginning of a beautiful summer day. The sun had already risen a good distance over the horizon, and he spied Corbin and Devin out in the nearby field hard at work. The faint odor of bacon was in the air, and his stomach growled. Starving, James made his way from his room. He found Mary shelling peas at the table where they had dinner the night before. She glanced up as he emerged. "Feeling better?" About to answer, he waited as a yawn that could not be denied expressed itself. A little. His leg did throb, but not nearly to the degree it had yesterday. It must be on the mend. "We thought it best not to wake you. Saren came by earlier and picked up his wagon. He left for home an hour ago." Taking another pod, she cracked it open and emptied the peas into a bowl already half filled. "Corbin and Devin are out in the field, as is Elizabeth. Sienna's around here somewhere. Are you hungry?" The growl from her stomach was all answer she needed. Smiling, she said, "I know how to fix that." She tapped the chair next to her. "Sit here and I will bring you something." She set down the empty pod before disappearing into the kitchen, returning shortly with a plate full of biscuits and a small jar of jam. She placed the plate in front of him and then returned to the kitchen. When she emerged, she bore a skillet containing eggs and potatoes from breakfast. She scraped the rest onto his plate. "The eggs may be a bit cool, but they've been ready for a while." Cool though they were very good. He put a hearty helping of jam on his biscuit and took a bite. The taste brought back the memories of his grandmother's biscuits and produced a touch of homesickness. "Good breakfast. It reminds me of home." Returning to her peas, she smiled at the compliment. "Sarah said he found you lost in the woods, almost ready to be killed by a pack of wolves." More question than statement, she cast him a glance as another pod split under her expectant hands. "That's true. He did. If it wasn't for him, I'd be dead." "How did you get in those woods in the first place, if you don't mind my asking?" Not sure what to say, he settled for, "It's kind of hard to explain, really. I don't exactly know how I got there, to tell you the truth." It was the truth in that he couldn't tell her exactly, but he did have a few unsubstantiated theories. "Poor boy. Will you return home once your leg heals?" James nodded. "I intend to, but I may stay around here at least for a while." Finishing the last of the breakfast and feeling very satisfied, he sat back and watched her extract peas from the next couple of pods. She had a large pile of them yet to shell. "If you like, I can help with that. I used to help my grandmother. That would be nice, thank you. Rising, she removed she removed his dirty plates and brought him a bowl. Placing it before him, she divided the peas. She gave herself a larger portion, and they began shelling in earnest. He felt good about his progress, his bowl filling at a steady pace. Soon his hands were shelling like a pro. His pile was nearly reduced by half when Sienna came in with the dogs trotting beside her. Spying James shelling peas with her mother, she sat in the chair next to him. The dogs took position on the floor beneath the table. Mary kicked the dogs and explained, "Outside, you two." The dogs hopped up and raced out the door. "They'd stay in here all day if I let them." James gave her a grin. Taking another pod, he split it open, deposited the peas into his bowl, and reached for another. "Would you like to see the pond out back?" Sienna asked. "It's got a lot of ducks in it." James looked at Mary. "Don't be too long. Lunch will be ready in an hour or so." "Thank you for your help, James." He had just enough time to blurt out a quick "thank you" before Sienna grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the door. Unable to go as fast as she would like due to his legs, she encouraged him to walk faster with a firm, steady pull on his arm. "If we don't hurry, the ducks will be gone before we even get there." Once out the front door, the dogs ran to join them. She gave him a grand tour of all the things to be found on their farm, pointing out the chicken house, the dog houses, and everything else a little girl was interested in. When the pond with the ducks came into view, he agreed that there were a lot of ducks on the water, but there were several different species, none exactly matching any he'd seen back home, but ducks are ducks. They found a good spot to sit, relax, and enjoyed watching their antics. James got comfortable nestling against the side of a tall tree. Once settled, Sienna sat right next to him. He couldn't help but smile. "When I was little, my father would take me camping near where I grew up. We would hike a long way through the mountains, sometimes taking as much as 2 days before reaching our campsite. Often, we would camp near a lake, and it always felt like we were the first people to have ever been there. We watched the geese as they came in to rest on their trip south." "Where is your father now?" "Dead. He's been gone for some time now." "That's sad." "Sometimes I really miss him, but he's never really gone, not as long as I keep him alive in my memories." "Mama and Papa are never going to die. They said so." James smiled at her innocence. "That would be good. And I'm never going to leave them, ever." And the look in her eyes said she meant it wholeheartedly. "Later on, you may change your mind. Just enjoy the time you have with them now." Enjoying the peace and quiet, he changed position and lay flat on the ground. Far above, clouds drifted lazily across the sky. Sienna laid her head next to James's, and over the course of the next hour, they alternated between finding different shapes in the sky, and watching the ducks. Their quiet morning was eventually interrupted when Sienna's mother called them in for lunch. James felt it was far too soon since he last ate, but realized that the family had eaten much earlier than he. Though not really hungry, James allowed Sienna to help him to his feet and back to the farmhouse. The smell of fresh baked bread reached them long before they neared the house. Corbin and Devin had already returned from the field. They stood at the well in the front yard and washed the dust and dirt from their hands and faces. As Corbin and Sienna approached, a rider came along at a gallop up the lane. "Corbin!" Drying his hands on the towel, Corbin turned toward the rider. "What's the good word, Lord?" "What's the good word, Lord?" "The mayor has called an emergency council meeting for this evening. He wants all members there an hour before nightfall." Corbin frowned. "What's all this all about?" "He didn't say, only that I notify all the members and do it fast. Tell the mayor I'll be there." "I shall." He gave Corbin a nod and turned his horse about. "I'll see you tonight." With that, he prodded his horse into a gallop and was off. Corbin watched Lord depart for a moment, then turned to James. "If the mayor is sending Lord to summon the council members for an emergency meeting, there must be trouble afoot." "What do you mean?" "The council only meets once, maybe twice a month, to discuss the area's business, so this can only be bad news." He turned to Devin. "You'll need to finish the south field by yourself. I'm heading into town after we eat, and I may not be back until late." Nodding, Devin entered the house with Sienna to tell their mother the news. "It would be best if you remained here too." "I understand," James replied. After the meal, Corbin kissed his wife goodbye and headed into town. Devin took Elizabeth to the south field, while James helped Mary with chores that his leg would allow. Late afternoon rolled around, and Mary began the preparations for dinner. She sent him to the well for water. He hobbled out the door with a spear in one hand and a bucket in the other. He reached the well and began drawing water from deep below. Devin and Elizabeth appeared, looking tired, sweaty, and dirty. He took a ladle and offered them a drink. "Thanks, James," Elizabeth said, taking the ladle. Devin didn't say much, simply went to the basin and proceeded to wash off the dirt and grime from his face and hands. James filled the bucket and carried it back to the house. He gave the water-filled bucket to Mary, then proceeded to set the table. After that, Mary thanked him for his help and suggested that he rest until dinner. It will take a few minutes longer before dinner will be ready. We wouldn't want you to overtax your leg. It was throbbing something terrible. Nodding, he took a seat at the table to wait for dinner. Side note, James is like me. If I'm at someone's house for dinner, I'll ask how I can help, and I'll be a help. I'm not going to sit there and expect them to wait on me. And I think that's just the mark of a good guest. So if you're a guest, just help out. It's appreciated. Once she deemed the stew ready, Mary brought it to the table and called the others. Shouldn't we wait for Papa? Sienna asked as she took her place next to James. Mary shook her head and spooned stew into Sienna's bowl. Your Papa said not to hold dinner, that he would not be home until after dark. She turned her attention to Devin. Would you please slice the bread? Devin took the knife and removed sections, passing them around. Bread and stew seemed to be the mainstay of meals in these parts. First Saren, now Mary. Of course, Mary was by far the superior of the two. Near the end of the meal, a horse was heard approaching from down the lane. Sienna bolted out of her seat and rushed to the window. It's Papa, she exclaimed happily, then ran for the door. Sienna! Ignoring her mother's cry, she threw open the door and vanished outside. A moment later, the dogs were heard barking to greet their master's return. Mary walked to the open doorway, then the look she sent outside was filled with both gladness and worry. She stepped aside to allow Corbin enter, with Sienna hugging him around the middle. By the look on Corbin's face, whatever the meeting with the mayor had been about, it hadn't been good. Devin, take care of my horse, please. Okay, Papa. Taking a last bite of stew, he took a slice of bread as he headed out the door. As Corbin took his seat at the table, Mary filled a bowl with stew for him. What happened? The Empire has done what we feared for so long. It has launched an assault on Matic. No. Corbin took a bite and nodded. I'm afraid so. They have already pushed several hundred leagues north and have laid siege to the town of Saragon. The Matic Council sent runners to Castle Cardry for assistance. One passed through and gave the mayor forewarning. Are we in danger? Not at present. Their attack seems to be only against Matic so far, though if Matic falls, the kingdom of Cardry will most likely be next. What does the mayor wish us to do? Right now, there's nothing we can do. It is the middle of summer and harvest is not far off. We cannot spare anyone. However, if the situation worsens and they feel Cardry will be threatened, I'm sure levies will be summoned. Elizabeth wrinkled her nose in confusion. A levy, Papa? It's where they summon all able-bodied men for service. I don't think we have much to worry about. Devin's still too young, and they don't enlist girls for fighting. What about James? Sienna asked. James, I'm afraid, would be a prime candidate. Glancing at James, he continued, I don't think you have much to worry about at the moment. The war does come here. It's still a ways off. James didn't like what he was hearing. He definitely did not want to go into the army, especially in an age where doctors used leeches and hard liquor was the only painkiller. Thinking of documentaries that described the Civil War caused a cold shiver to go down his back. No matter how bad it had been then, here it would be worse. The main thing the mayor wants us to do is to keep our eyes open for strangers and people asking a lot of questions. There could be spies scouting for the Empire. Sienna turned wide eyes to James. Are you a spy? What? Startled, he almost choked on the mouthful. Sienna, her mouth was scolded. That is not the sort of question you ask a guest in your home. Withering under the stern glare of her father, she said quietly to James, Sorry. That's okay, she replied, and I'm not a spy. Just someone who has lost his way. That's good. I mean, good you're not a spy. Who's not a spy? Devin asked as he entered through the door and returned to his seat at the table. James, Sienna answered. Her brother glanced at the guest with much more interest than previously. Is he supposed to be one? No, Elizabeth joined in. He is not. So what's the problem? The problem, their father interjected, is people only hear the end of a conversation. He glared at his children, quieted them in a way only a father can, and then flashed James a smile that lasted only a second. Corbin stood and stretched. James, let's take a walk. That is, if your leg is up to it. Surprised by the request, James came to his feet. I can make it. The pain is not so bad anymore. Good. Then come along. Motioning for James to follow, he headed for the front door. As they exited, the dogs ran behind James as he and James made their way to the stables. I want to talk with you privately. Saren told me everything about your time with him. I know you're a mage. Holding up his hands, he forestalled James from commenting. I'm a pretty good judge of people, and I don't get any feelings of evil about you. So your being a mage doesn't bother me. I haven't told anyone else, and as far as I know, only Saren and I am aware of this. But there was more than the Empire's thrust into Matic that has the American concern. We've known the Empire has been on the verge of attacking for several years. What preparations could be made have been made. He reached down and scratched Tor's head. No, what I want to talk with you about has to do with something else. Several nights ago, Hearn, a farmer that lives a few miles out of town near the forest fringe, disappeared. The day before, he asked the neighbor for help in getting rid of a stump in his field. When the neighbor arrived, he discovered Hearn's front door open. There was no sign of him outside, so the neighbor went inside to investigate. Hearn was not there either. The table had been set for dinner. His plate was clean, as it had just been removed from the shelf. A bowl of stew sat on the table. It hadn't been touched. The neighbor then rushed outside, calling Hearn's name, but never received an answer. Both inside and out, there weren't any signs of a struggle. So far, no sign of Hearn has been found though the entire area has been scoured. Those living closest claim they hadn't seen or heard anything strange the night before. James glanced uncertainly at his host. What does this have to do with me? Nothing directly, but let me finish, please. Getting a nod from James, he continued. Last night, another went missing, this time a small boy. He went to fetch water from the well and failed to return. When his parents were looking for him, they found the pail on the ground by the well, but no sign of the boy. The boy's family lives on the edge of the forest, like Hearn, though about 2 or 3 miles farther down the road. I was hoping that there would be some way you might help find them. I'm not sure what help I could be, Devin. Despite what Saren might have said, I'm still pretty new to this whole magic business. I will think on it and see if I can come up with some ideas. We would be grateful with whatever aid you can give. James thought for a bit. Whenever detectives try to solve a case, they always examine the scene of the crime. Maybe we could ride to Hearn's place in the morning and have a look around. Maybe something would turn up. Okay then, first thing in the morning. We better get back before Mary sends one of the young ones to see what's going on. James agreed. They returned to the house where Mary was readying the children for bed. With a round of good nights and several kisses, they headed to their rooms. James took his leave of Corbin and Mary and went to his room as well. He remained awake most of the night, working to come up with some way to help. That's the end of chapter 4. Not much of a commentary on this one. I think the next one we'll have a bit more. But so James is in the air. James is with Corbin now. Hearn is missing. The little boy's missing, and now James is going to have to go and find it. So let's see what happens. Thank you for being with me through chapter 4, and I appreciate it. If you haven't already, like this post. Also, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, do so, and you'll get alerts whenever whenever I post something. Also, once I hit 1,000 followers, then I can go to the next level and what I can do with YouTube. So I'm really hoping to get to 1,000. And so I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.